I was 22 when the doctor said the word that changed everything. Cancer. For a moment, the room felt like it stopped breathing. The doctor kept talking about treatment, chemotherapy, survival rates, but all I could think about was my parents. I kept telling myself they would be there for me, that no matter how bad things got, they would help me through it. That's what parents are supposed to do. When I told them that evening, my mother just stared at me in silence. My dad barely looked up from his phone. "Are you sure the doctor didn't make a mistake?" Mom finally said. I forced a weak smile. They ran the tests twice. The treatments started a few weeks later. Chemotherapy was brutal. Some days I couldn't even stand without feeling dizzy. My hair started falling out, and the fatigue felt like my body weighed 1,000 pounds. At first, my parents acted supportive in front of other people. They told relatives they were helping me through a difficult time. But behind closed doors, everything felt different. Hospital visits became an inconvenience. Driving me to appointments became a burden. One night, after I asked Dad if he could take me to the hospital the next morning, he sighed loudly. "Can't you take a taxi or something?" "I'm too weak to travel alone," I said quietly. Mom crossed her arms. "This whole situation is exhausting for everyone." For everyone. The words stung more than the chemotherapy. A few weeks later, the medical bills started piling up. I tried to handle as much as I could, but the stress kept growing. Finally, one evening my parents asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. Something about the silence in the room made my stomach tighten. Dad folded his arms. "You're an adult now," he said firmly. "You need to start taking responsibility for your own life." I stared at him, not sure I had heard correctly. "I'm fighting cancer," I whispered. Mom avoided my eyes. "We just can't deal with this level of stress anymore." The next words felt unreal. "Maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while." Somewhere else. While I was going through chemotherapy, 2 days later, a few boxes with my clothes were sitting by the front door. My parents barely looked at me as I picked them up, and just like that, I walked out of my childhood home, sick, exhausted, and completely alone. But what hurt the most wasn't the cancer. It was realizing my own parents had abandoned me when I needed them the most. The first night after leaving my parents' house, I slept on my friend Marcus's couch. I remember staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had collapsed so quickly. Just a few months earlier, I had a normal life. Now I was fighting cancer and didn't even have a place to live. Marcus and his family didn't ask questions. They simply helped. His mom cooked meals I could actually keep down after chemotherapy. Marcus drove me to the hospital when I was too weak to stand. Sometimes he even sat beside me during the long treatment sessions. They weren't my family, but they treated me like I mattered. Meanwhile, my parents disappeared from my life completely. No phone calls, no messages, not even a simple, "How are you?" At first, I kept checking my phone, hoping to see their names appear on the screen. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Nothing. Chemotherapy was the hardest thing I had ever experienced. Some days, I felt like my body was shutting down. My energy was gone. My hair had fallen out, and the mirror barely reflected the person I used to be. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered something. If I survived this, I would never depend on people who could abandon me so easily. 2 long years passed like that. Hospital visits, recovery days, small victories. Then one afternoon, my doctor walked into the room with a smile I hadn't seen before. The scans came back clear. He said, "You're cancer-free." For a few seconds, I couldn't even speak. All the pain, fear, and sleepless nights suddenly felt worth it. But by then, my life had completely changed. I started working online during recovery, building a small business from my laptop. Slowly, month by month, it began to grow. What started as a side hustle eventually turned into a real company. 3 years passed. I had my own apartment, a stable life, and people around me who actually cared. My parents, however, were still completely absent until one afternoon. I was sitting in my office when my phone started ringing. I glanced at the screen, and my chest tightened instantly. Dad. I hadn't seen his name appear on my phone in 3 years. For a moment, I considered ignoring the call. But curiosity got the better of me, so I answered, "Hello." For a second, there was only silence on the other side of the line. Then my father spoke. "Son, we need to talk." His voice sounded different, nervous, almost desperate. And when he finally explained why he was calling after all these years, I realized something. He didn't miss me. He needed something from me. The line stayed quiet for a moment after my father finished speaking. $30,000. That was the amount they needed to save their house. 3 years ago, I had asked them for something much smaller. Rides to chemotherapy, a little support, someone to sit beside me during the worst days of my life. Instead, they told me I was an adult and needed to deal with my own problems. Now the same words echoed in my mind. "Do you remember the last thing you said to me before I left?" I asked. My father hesitated. "What do you mean?" "You told me I needed to handle my own problems." The silence that followed felt heavy. I was under a lot of stress back then. He muttered. I closed my eyes for a moment, remembering the hospital rooms, the exhaustion, and the nights when I didn't know if I would survive. "I had cancer," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but you still let me walk out that door alone." Another long pause followed. Then he tried again. "We're still your parents." Maybe those words once meant something, but cancer had taught me something important. Family is the people who stay when things get hard. And my parents had already chosen to leave. "So, will you help us?" he asked. I took a slow breath. Then I gave him the same advice he once gave me. For simple words, handle your own problems. For several seconds, my father didn't say anything. Then his voice finally broke the silence. "You're serious?" "Yes," I said calmly, because sometimes the hardest truth people face is the one they created themselves.